All right, folks. There was a few videos I thought about making earlier today. Just wasn't in it today. Have some stuff I want to talk about this week. But hey, what about that whole Tim Pool, Yay, Milo, Nick Fuentes thing, huh? Yeah, that just happened. I just finally basically got through the interview. It's about midnight now. So, in any case, there wasn't much of an interview, but I watched the rest of Tim's show, of course. And what I want to talk about is this whole Jewish conspiracy idea, and not that. Um, let's state this up front. I think that the cabal of global elitists that are trying to control all things in the world are not all Jewish. I think that there are several factors to what is going on here, and the perspective of that there's a lot of Jews that control the media or banking and all that stuff is is seen as control, right? And I know that oftentimes it isn't. It isn't. Yeah, this is going to be one I have to be careful how I speak here. Um, right? So let's put this up front. I do not believe that Jews control the world. Okay? I believe that the spirit of evil in Satan controls the world. And I believe that there are people who are Zionists. Some of them happen to be Jews, some of them happen to be Christians. And they believe in controlling things for Jewish people in speech, such as, let's say, uh, labeling everything as anti Semitism because of historical persecution of the Jewish people. I think that the church definitely persecuted the Jewish people, which was wrong of the church, but that did not come until the church became married to the beast. And this happened for various reasons. It's actually primarily why Paul the Apostle wrote the book of Romans. Unfortunately, most Protestants have no idea about the book of Romans because there's all this lore that was built up about it through Martin Luther. And really, he was addressing Jews that were kicked out of Rome for a period of time and allowed to be brought back in with the Roman Christians. And this created conflicts in the church. And so Paul was addressing that very specifically. And that needs to be understood. Now, people would say, well, but Bill, obviously the Jews are kicked out all over the place. Well, their ways were strange and weird to people. Biblically, though, let's talk on that front. Biblically, Christ basically made the distinction that those people who were supposed to be the emissaries of God's words were never truly obedient. And look, modern Christians, you aren't really truly obedient either. Need I get on my topic of violence? And again, I will always say this is a hard one for me. There are many things that are hard about the faith. Many things. It's not because I'm a violent man that wants to go around beating people up, but man, self-defense even. That's off the table, Christians. You don't believe that anymore, though. You lost that, like, I don't know, 1,600 years ago. But anyways, back to this thing. This was all prophesied, though, in the Bible. The Jews were the Hebrews, the Israelites. They were a group of people who was the lineage of Abraham, which then would bring in and usher Christ unto the world. And they rejected Christ, so at some point the church uh, rejected them. And then later on, I think the evidence of the Septuagint versus, let's say, the later sorry, excuse me, Hebraic texts from about the third, fourth century. That's A.D., not B.C. I'm pretty sure that is uh, a different text than the Septuagint was copied from. The Septuagint is about 800 years older than that text. Now, we don't have copies from that time period, but we do have copies of the early church fathers, which can completely reconstruct those things. And we can reconstruct the New Testament that way as well, just by merely reading the quotes that the early church fathers wrote, because they wrote so much. And that's an important thing, guys, writing, documenting, and all that stuff. And I think, to me, that shows the power of Christ and God. In fact, one of Christ's prophecies was that the mustard seed, the smallest of all seeds, would be planted into the ground and yet would create a huge tree. And that is like the kingdom of God. That is us Christians who don't belong to this kingdom on this earth. And so, anyways, it's a little theology there, but getting back to this whole thing, then, of course, there was the persecution that happened and the Holocaust. And again, people conflate these things about how Jewish people created liberalism, and that's what Adolf Hitler was rejecting. But he was also rejecting Jewish communism, which is where the communists say that Adolf Hitler wasn't a socialist. So, well, that's a lie. He totally was a socialist. He just wasn't a socialist for everybody, or at least the Jews. He wanted to prioritize races. Sounds kind of similar to something that modern Marxists believe in, the new left, you know. And that whole incident is used just like anything else, like misogyny, right? You know, how feminists use this, you can't criticize me because misogyny, or race. Well, I'm black, you can't criticize me because I'm black, you're just being racist. Or whatever, you're gay, trans, whatever. And it's all silly, it's sophomoric, and it's meant to be divisive. It's not meant to have any sort of real intellectual conversation. It's all synthetic. It's a point of pride, in fact, and it's nutty. So, like, we have all these things. Well, why would Jewish people, secular or even religious, who have power, why would they want to try to control the narrative? Well, first, let's make this distinction. There's all kinds of various sects of Jews. There's all kinds of different various groups. There are more conservative and less conservative Jews. I mean, this works in every group. We have this with the Amish, between the full hardcore conservative Amish, and then the beachy Amish, and then like Mennonites, and then all the way out to the super liberal. This is just how human beings work. It's how we organize. So the majority of what we see as far as ownership and media and stuff is, I believe, from secular Jews. Now, some of them might hold some religious tenets. You know, you have like Larry David, if you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, going to Shabbos and going to the temple and all that stuff on occasion, on a special occasion or whatever. But I don't think Larry David actually believes in God. A lot of these guys are atheists, but they believe in the tradition. And so, again, we go back to maybe the scriptures that a lot of the modern Bibles use, that were written in the 3rd and 4th centuries, were a apology against Christ and were manipulated in order to deny Christ, because the scriptures so accurately predicted his coming. And like, it's this whole thing where you're talking about a religion that took over another religion, and there are a lot of groups, various groups, not all Jews, but various groups who hate Christians for that, right? Caught a clip from the Daily Wire the other day, Jordan Peterson doing this roundtable talk about the Bible and Exodus and various things, and it was just Dennis Prager, reacting to something that Peterson said, and he said, that's such a Christian response. And it's funny. It's funny, and I like Prager. Wouldn't say I agree with him on a zillion and one things, but I like Prager. But it's funny because that is a Jewish thing, right? Just like the Muslims don't agree in Christ. Though Christ is a figure, at least Jesus, in their beliefs and is considered a prophet. So these things are quite complicated. Now, I think if you look at both religions, both Islam and Judaism, well, just like the structure and the narrative of the Bible, it points back to Christ. Both of them do. And Christ is always that central figure because Christ is at the center of all things. And this is one of the mysteries of the world. And when you understand that, and you maybe you don't seem to see the world or understand all the things that I might, but you understand that how all of this is pointing back to Christ's reality. And this was something that Ye, Fuentes, and Milo all believe in. They believe that we're in the end times, and so do I. The difference is, I think that they believe that the Jews control everything, and that's not correct. There are so many other groups. We have, of course, the papacy, which I believe is the false church and the Antichrist, but the real Antichrist belief, which the papacy has endorsed, is Marxism. And Karl Marx is that. And I think wokeism and all those things are exactly that. They literally are the cult of death. Now, if you talk to a cult expert, they'll say, well, it's not actually a cult because there's no leader. But there is a leader. There's Karl Marx. There is lots of thought leaders. It's just they're not up front. And yes, they were glorified and narcissistically so. I've talked many times on this channel about Marx and what he did and the horrible kind of person that he was. He hated God, and he was in an era where basically people lost their faith in God. And I, go through this with Nietzsche, my book, The Synthetic Society, when it is finally done, which I'm really diligently going to work hard on this year, guys. I'm about ready to reduce all my work hours and stuff and really knock some stuff out of the park. But anyways, that's an aside. There are organic motivations, though, that you would have to think, oh, if these people have a tradition and they want to preserve their people, just tribally, inherently, I think as a human being, there are motivations for people in power, even though there are numerous sects, to wish to wield control, because for thousands of years, as the Bible told them, that there would be a diaspora, that God would make their people a byword amongst the nations. That's a biblical prophecy that still exists today, folks. It's a biblical prophecy that still exists today. It's not because all Jews are horrible people. In fact, most Jews are actually great people. But there are forces at work that believe in globalism. And this gets back to the Zionist argument. And again, this is not all Jews, just like not all Christians are Zionists. And that is the advocating for Israel. This is one of my problems over the years with someone like Ben Shapiro. I still will catch clips or watch certain things of Ben Shapiro's. I don't watch him regularly because, dude, we live in the United States. You can talk about Israel. I get it.'t you don't live there. I get your wife's from Israel, yada, yada, yada. She's also a doctor, if you didn't know. Let's focus on our problems in the U.S. Israel's a socialist nation, which is troubling, that gets tons of subsidies from the U.S. and the Royal Crown and many other nations, from my understanding. And that is another interest, the Royal Crown, of course, and the old bloodlines. This stuff is far deeper than you guys would like to believe. There's the occultist beliefs and the occultist reason to bring in Zionism, because they believe... All right, guys, phone's getting full again, all them baby videos. I was saying there's an occultist belief for a case for Zionism, or at least one world government, because they believe in the Antichrist. Occultists do believe in the scriptures to some degree. They just read them and interpret them much differently. In fact, there's an interesting overlay in the way occultists look at the scriptures and Orthodox people do. And I think with someone who I've had the pleasure to meet, at least virtually, and talk to, and who I think is a thoughtful person, who's an Orthodox Christian and ethnically Jewish, and formerly an occultist, and that's Michael Witkoff. or Brother Augustine, and I really appreciate Michael. I don't agree with him on everything. If you watch me on the Unjustified Memes interviewing Michael, um, Michael, who I, by all accounts, talking with him, is a highly intelligent gentleman, and he agreed with everything I was saying. He was like, oh, I can't really see anything wrong with what you're saying here and there and everywhere. But, Michael understands, like if you watch someone like Jonathan Pajot or anything like that the Orthodox Church has a deeper understanding of these mysteries, and some of them have some crossover with the cultic idea. Now, this goes back to things that I believe about the reality of nature and how we can actually explain all of this, which again will be up in my coming book, which I'm not going to set a date on it right now, but hopefully it will be done this year. This year coming up, that is. But going back to the occultic beliefs, and again, I'm building a case that Bill's just not espousing nonsense that he doesn't know about. They believe in an antichrist coming. Now, they believe it's another Christ, not against Christ. Like the New Age also believes this, and there's, of course, a ton of crossover with that, and even Satanists, right? The Satanists believe in the Antichrist type Satan. But the other kinds of occultists, because there are many different sects. This is more complicated than what people want to present on the surface. But they essentially believe that Christ was a type, that Christ come along throughout ages and times, and they help bring about higher consciousness in human beings. That is the most essential thing. And part of them believe that the highest next level of consciousness, the level that we need to go, is to bring in a one world government, totalitarian state, because it's part of the prophecies. And the Zionists believe much of the same thing. Not necessarily the Jewish Zionists, but the Christian Zionists. And so, again, you start seeing these entangled alliances. And basically, the enemy of my enemy is my friend kind of thing. It's an interesting thing because when they were on, I saw they were on. Tim had already been streaming for over an hour or something like that. And I said something to my wife. And she goes, wait, why would Kanye and Nick Fuentes and Milo be on together? And I said, it's a strange time we live in this upheaval, because the enemy of my enemy is my friend. This will always hold true. This will always hold true. And I don't think any of them are enemies. They all feel like they're aligned with God, such as I do. But we come from different perspectives. I'm not going to blame a ethnic group of people for any of this stuff. I think that's ridiculous and sick. I judge people on their character, on their merit, and who they are. There might be a disproportionate amount of certain ethnicities and certain things, and that is because we have different genetic traits, guys. Did you know that Japanese men have the highest testosterone in the world? And then it's blacks, and I think it's Caucasians, and then Latinos or something like that. I might be mistaken on that, but yeah. At least the last time I read up on this. So though there are different tribes of black people, right? There are smaller and shorter black people over in Africa. The African people of larger size were often captured for slaves because they were believed to be stronger. But pound for pound, the strongest people in the world are probably Slavs. Yeah. Isn't that interesting? It's probably one of the reasons why they are highly prized as slaves. We have differences in what we excel in through our genetics. As the world becomes more intermingled, that might diffuse to some degree, but if you actually study these patterns of migrations, which we can and we have, not just through genetic testing, but we have historical documents as well as archaeological finds and whatever else, we can see how this worked out to a large degree. And we know that populations interbreed, they intermingle, the ethnicities basically become a new ethnicity. For instance, Hispanics are white technically, but they are an ethnicity of white. And of course, that goes back to that race thing, which is, I think, quite limiting. But again, how very deep and complicated is this conversation? In in I saw DJ Cobra talk about this. Jeremy mentioned this real quick. Tim and almost no one could manage that conversation, but really, I think I would. I all of this is going to take me 15, 20, 30 minutes to explain to you. I think I could get this across and be like, this is just where I'm coming from, man. And I just don't see how it is this different group or this particular group alone, and it is actually hurtful in the division in the whole race ideology. There are a lot of really good based Jews out there. I really like Joe Neerman of Good Logic, right? I don't think he's part of this cabal. In fact, I think he's against it. I think he's against the censorship and all these things. And, you know, this all really needs to be understood that we need to quit collectivizing everything. I think, yes, stereotypes are a heuristic. My friend Aiden Paladin was on Timcast the other week, as I were. My friend Aiden Paladin was on Timcast the other week, and she spoke directly to this idea of stereotypes being a heuristic. You study anything in social science, you will know this, and there's nothing wrong with it. There is nothing wrong with having a general stereotype. You judge all the time, folks. Saying you don't judge or telling others that they did judge is a judgment unto itself. So again, let's escape these illogical, synthetic beliefs. Now, I think again, it needs to be clear that there are groups of globalists who are not just Zionists, but not just Jewish, not just the papacy, not just the Rhodes Scholars, not just the Jesuits, not just whomever, the CCP, Xi Jinping, but they do work together. Biblically speaking, this is actually what the Bible says. And the whole idea of an antichrist is another Christ, a replacement Christ, and also someone who is completely antithetical to Christ. The term denotes both. And it doesn't necessarily even mean an individual. I think it's an ideology. John says it very much in his book. In John 1, he says, the spirit of Antichrist is with us even as we speak. And that spirit, I believe, is Gnosticism, which is largely the modern spirit of wokeism, new leftism, all of that stuff. And it is pushed down upon you from a synthetic society, but it is not just it is not just an ethnic group, nor is it all members of that ethnic group. There are people of European heritage. Again, there's the royal line. It is those who have the will and the way to have power. It is the master-slave morality that Nietzsche talked about. Nietzsche was right in so many things. What he was wrong on was God being dead, because God never died. He only died in the hearts of men. And I'm not a Christian nihilist, which Nietzsche talks about in any way, shape, or form. And I, my whole life, wish to see the Lord return, and I am in no way a Zionist wishing to make it happen. I actually wish to slow it, this evil to come down, because that is our job as Christians. We are the salt, the preservative of the earth, and the fertilizer and the preservative. That's what we are. And the belief that you are going to bring God to earth sooner for judgment is terrible, because you're co-signing people to death without being saved, without hearing the message of Christ, without understanding the nature of reality. It is the furthest thing away from what God intended. And this is very much divined in John's revelation, the revealing of how mankind would go. And this revealing has phases to it, I believe, as a Christian who takes a historicist perspective. And that's what Marxists take. It's interesting, again, that those things are directly opposed. And the Marxists trying to manipulate Christianity all the time, saying blasphemous things, saying heretical things like that Christ was a communist, or the early Christians were communists. They lived communally, but those who did not work did not eat. Those who were a burden were not taken care of. Um, this Only those who could not take care of themselves were sought after. That is true charity. Anyone else who would not work, would not do what they must do, that is taking away from others. That is selfishness. And communism's slavery. The Bible's a book of liberty, right? So liberty from death and sin, and liberty, honestly, there's nothing in the Bible that supports monarchy. That's Justinianism. That's a whole other issue with orthodoxy. And that was actually something I wanted to address too. And I've noticed this directly. There is a lot of true anti-Semitism. This whole notion, the whole Milo thing. Whenever else was being talked about there, that is deep in the based Orthodox, and it's not going to help them and their movement in the end. Or we're going to bring forth a physical war instead of a spiritual one. But in any case, guys, my phone keeps cutting out on me. I'm going to leave it there. This has been All Minus One. My name is Bill, and I wish you all well.